So these are offspring from the orchard where we're headed to. And those were in turn offspring from the trees my dad planted in 1957. But we've got a problem here that probably everybody ought to be aware of, and that is these trees that are dead over here have all died from oak wilt, which spreads by root grafting. So once it gets started in your orchard, it will kill every tree here if we didn't stop it. And we have stopped it, at least mostly stopped it by trenching around the diseased trees, and then trenching another trench around the healthy trees, one more layer in. But a couple places it has jumped, and it moves through the air by nidodulid beetles, little picnic beetles, who bring the fungus from an oak tree. But anyway, we've had some experts on oak wilt working in this stand and saying, wow, I never saw a tree die that quickly from oak wilt. So they're very susceptible to it.
So it doesn't treat the oaks the same way?
Well, there's a lot of species of oak, and the red oaks are the most susceptible. So it kind of acts like as susceptible as a red oak. But once we create an orchard where all these trees are root grafted to each other, we've got the perfect setup for the perfect storm.
Is oak wilt a North American native disease, or is it like sort of like chestnut blight only for Chinese chestnuts?
Nobody knows where it came from. It's been here for a long time. And for some reason, it, at least in Ohio, and I think a lot of places, it has suddenly got to sort of an epidemic where it used to be not as common as it is now. So why now and not in the past? And there's a lot of theories on that. You know, certainly the composition of the forest cover has changed, and the climate has changed, and a lot of things have changed. And so one or more of those is probably the reason, but we don't know which one. But people have known what it is and the causal organism for a long time, but it's sort of become an epidemic in the forest in Ohio and other places on the oak trees. And interestingly, some of you may know this, the Menominee tribe in Wisconsin has some huge tract of forest land that they manage, and they have a very long-term vision, and they've got really good professional forests, and they do a lot of work on there. And it's kind of interesting, they're way ahead of the Forest Service in a lot of the work that they're doing, and one of the things that they are really dealing with aggressively is oak wilt. So now people from the U.S. Forest Service go to see what the Menominee are doing so they can catch up to them. So we've gotten some advice from that work that has gone on in Wisconsin. And I guess it feels good to me to have some Native Americans, finally, like, that we're listening to. But anyway, oak wilt's a big problem there too. And that forest, oak is a valuable timber tree, and that's kind of their economic reason to look at it. And so they have developed the protocol that we are going to employ here to stop it.
How deep of a trench do you have to dig?
You basically just have to sever any roots that might be root grafted. And chestnuts are pretty shallow root. Well, they have both deep roots and shallow roots, but the deep roots go straight down, so it's the shallow roots that intersect and root graft. And I guess the answer to your question is 3 feet seems to be adequate. Okay. That's how deep our trencher went.
Okay, so you use a trencher, not just like a subsoiler?
Yeah, we've used a trencher. You've got to cut the roots. If you're using a subsoiler, you'd pull out a lot of roots. We just want to cut them off. And there might even be like one of these little saw blade kind of things. Because
Do you have to do that do you have to do that yearly or just
well, you just have to do it once unless it jumps the trench. So you dig the trench, and usually in the winter time is the best time, and then you just fill it back in. All you need to do is cut the roots, and they don't have enough time to regrow before the diseased tree is dead.
So that isn't then in the soil to get to a good tree
Okay,
after that one's gone.
So the fungus does not and cannot live in the soil.
Okay.
It can only live in a live tree. Now the caveat of that is the top of the tree can die, but the roots can be alive for a few years. So the new protocol is to girdle and treat with herbicide the dead trees or the dying trees, and then pull them out. So it's a girdle, herbicide, and remove the whole stump. And then, but kind of once that's done, you can go back in and replant. There's no danger of the disease remaining in the soil once you pull the roots out. And we've even got, you know, the chestnuts like to root sprout. We got some of the very first trees that died, you know, maybe 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, and they've had sprouts come up that seem to be fine. So, like everything in chestnut, they're all, you know, how does that work? But it turns out that when a chestnut sprouts from the stump, that sprout forms its own root system that's not attached to the stump from which it came. This was pointed out to me by somebody who was looking at American chestnuts. He says, you know, you can take those old dead sprouts and you can pull them, and they are not attached to the stump. They got their own root system. So maybe it's almost like replanting if you just allow the coppice growth to come up. So we're going to let these trees go that are now maybe 5 years old, that are just sprouts from a tree that died from Oak Wilt. We'll see what happens. But we're also, so we're going to remove, I don't know, probably close to 100 live trees in addition to the couple hundred, because they're not only here but other places, and then we'll probably replant with new trees. So I got better trees than these are to stick in the spot, so we'll be back in production. But then how do we keep the reinfection from starting? And that's one way, is to get rid of the red oaks, but apparently those beetles can fly pretty far.
Hate to take out all